Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's BC Europe Cleantech Connect series discussion on power management and alternative fuels. It is September 22nd, Tuesday, for Climate Week, New York City, and we're delighted to be a series that is collaborating with Climate Week and all of the great guests we have here from across Europe. Today's discussion will include country partners from France and Ireland, and then of course our team here at Foresight in collaboration with the Core Cleantech Cluster project that we've been developing. There's a great suite of panelists and speakers to share lots of information, so expect to learn a lot. If you do have questions, please do not hesitate to enter in the Q&A panel or the chat function. We'll be monitoring both. And with that said, we're going to do some introductions from our guests in France and in Ireland, of course. So let's start here with Frank Flood from the Consulate General of Ireland. Over to you, Frank.
Thank you very much, Jeanette, and good morning to everybody in BC, and good evening to everybody in Europe. My name is Frank Flood, and I have the honour and pleasure of being Ireland's first Consul General in Vancouver. And I have two main objectives here this morning. One is to thank sincerely Foresight for this excellent series that's been run in conjunction with Climate Week, and for all the work they do on behalf of Cleantech. It's never been more important, and collaboration has never been more important. Secondly, I think what really excites me and what's really useful about this whole series of seminars is its timing. The timing could not be better in these days of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's very important that we reach out to each other and collaborate as much as possible. And in these days of uncertainty, there's nothing more certain than that Canada and Europe, and especially the EU, can really work together and help address the green agenda. I mean, it's the EU in particular. We now have 750 billion committed to the economic recovery with the pandemic, and of that, 30% will be combined and contributed to the recovery under green measures, so that we have a green recovery. And it's very important that we can rebuild our economy, that Ireland and takes its part and plays its part. And Ireland now has a new government. We have the Greens in power once more, and the Greens will ensure that our new climate action policy plan is fully developed, and that we are outgoing and looking forward, as we always are, to innovation and to how we can work with partners to advance our economic prosperity and recover from this terrible pandemic. Ireland, of course, has always been a great entry point into the EU. It's unfortunately now we were the only member state which is English-speaking, common law, Eurozone country. But at the same time, we have to make the best of this. We will always keep our ties with the UK, but it has made us look around, and it has made us even more open to collaboration with countries such as Canada, who are also seeking to address the green agenda and to promote economic prosperity. Certainly, the Consulate will always be there. We have a brand new office now in downtown Vancouver. And if there's anything the Consulate can ever do to support this collaboration, please feel free to contact me. So I'll leave it at that, and finally want to thank my ESB Irish colleagues for taking part in the panel today, and to wish Foresight every success throughout this week, and to hopefully give us something which we can build on and collaborate meaningful in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. Very much appreciated. Some really great takeaways there already in terms of engagement, and having an Irish team member has also been exciting because we're learning more and more how progressive Ireland is working on various projects and initiatives. So thank you. Next up, I'm going to pass it over to Philippe Suter from the Consul General of France. Philippe.
Bonjour à tous et bonne soirée à ceux qui sont en Europe. Thank you very much to the amazing team of Foresight for organizing these meetings. Et merci aussi à Elisabeth Loget et Emmanuel Cantegrel pour votre participation. The team of France in Western Canada is also dedicated to fostering trade and investments, advising companies, SMEs, and startups, thanks also to the expertise of our economic department, of our our embassy in Ottawa, the network of our trade commission called Business France, and fellow citizens already settled here, like the new French Executive Circle in Western Canada. Now we have together to rebuild to a more resilient society. This is the main goal of the French Green Recovery Plan, published on September the 3rd, which will mobilize 30 billion euros to finance the ecological transition, a massive investment to accelerate the transition. This will be achieved through, among other things, a 50% reduction in final energy consumption in 2050 compared to 2015. In the most energy-intensive areas, the recovery plan allocates funds for the energy efficiency renovation of buildings, for transportation, of course, greening of the private car fleet, development of public transportation, implementation of a support plan for the rail sector, and for the decarbonization of industrial sites. In addition, France has also generalized the deployment of Linky smart meters, which remotely read the consumption, enabling private households to monitor their energy consumption in real time. I would also add that since 2016, an initiative supports young, innovative companies whose products or services contribute to green growth. To date, more than 120 companies have been awarded this Cleantech Vert label. The aim of this community is, of course, to capitalize on the progress and innovative solutions of the digital world in support of the ecological transition. And finally, to decarbonize the energy production, for which British Columbia is also an excellent player, France will increase the share of renewable energies to 32% of gross final energy consumption by 2030, in particular thanks to the massive development of green energy and green hydrogen. Based on these common goals and examples of sector open for cooperation, I'm looking forward to create today and in the coming days new synergies, new connections, thanks to Foresight, thanks to all the SMEs here in British Columbia, for changing production mode, better management of energy, and lower consumption. So all the best to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. It's great to see some bold targets set out by France. Really exciting. Before I dive into the first panel, I do want to introduce myself. My name is Jeanette Jackson. I'm the CEO of Foresight. If you have not heard about our organization, we are a not-for-profit accelerator dedicated to advancing the growth and impact of clean tech ecosystems in Western Canada. We do that through a series of programs and initiatives that support what we call the Helix 5 stakeholder group. So the startup community is foundational to our work, but it's really important that we have industry, academia, investors, and government at the table to make sure that we have an environment where these innovators and startups can really succeed. What makes us unique is the approach that we take. So we're very market-driven, entrepreneurial, collaborative, and results-oriented. Not only do we welcome everyone into our accelerator, we really want to help triage and make sure that they're focusing their innovations on the right problems, that it's problem-driven innovation, that they have access to networks around the world in platforms such as this. And ultimately, the three primary goals are to drive domestic and international adoption of clean technology innovation, really help the companies scale more quickly. And sometimes that's a capital thing, and sometimes that's policy or again, just finding the right fit for your technology. And then, of course, be an organization that shows that collaboration internationally between Canada and other countries is foundational to all of our success as we transition to a green economy. In terms of our success to date, we've supported well over 500 ventures now. I think this couple of numbers are increasing. And as you mentioned, Philippe, you know, the economics have to be there as well. The reality is that today, technologies that address climate change are good business. And so that we've created over 5,000 green jobs. We've seen over 250 million in capital into these companies and well over 50 million in revenue. In terms of the core cluster, that's an initiative that we embarked on a year ago. We engaged over 1,000 stakeholders throughout the province of British Columbia to understand where they see opportunities for collaboration, competitiveness. So obviously, you know, there's natural little subclusters and hubs that have been building in hydrogen and carbon capture and water, and of course, digital tech with our digital supercluster here in the province. And so the ultimate mission of the core cluster strategy is to support a clean economy and position BC as a global center for innovation, talent, and capital based on those areas of competitiveness and competency. So for the agenda today, we've already done our welcome comments. We're going to have two panel discussions. The first is going to be country overviews of power and energy management from Ireland, France, and British Columbia, Canada. We're a little bit of a subset of Canada, of course. And then we'll move on to a panel discussion where we're going to hear from innovators and corporations to understand sort of their needs to help address market gaps and, of course, scale their technology and innovation more quickly. Please don't hesitate to enter your questions in the Q&A box. And without further ado, I'm going to jump right in and pass it over to Cormac Madden, Environment and Sustainability Manager at ESB Group. Cormac, over to you.
Thanks very much, Jeanette, and it's a great opportunity to speak to you all here. I thought in talking about power management in Ireland, I would start off first with Ireland, and I'll say a little bit about ESB along the way. If you could change the first slide, please, Katrina. Thank you. So obviously, this is Ireland west of UK, and there's a huge sea area to the west of Ireland, and that's quite significant for the story that's unfolding there. Could I have the next slide? So what you see, sorry for the lurid colours, but what you see there inside that red border is actually the territory of Ireland. So Ireland, in fact, can be seen as one of the biggest countries in Western Europe in this dimension. It's basically a very big country with a tiny bit of land in one corner. So that is obviously hugely significant for where Ireland looks to for renewable energy. And it's interesting that we've spent a lot of years down in the past looking for oil under the sea in that territory. And there was abundant energy there where we weren't looking for it. So on the next slide, you can see that in that area, there's one of the best wind resources in the world. So that light red area you see to the south and east of Ireland and around the UK is actually a terrific wind resource, and it's being developed currently. There's 12 gigawatts of offshore wind in development in Ireland. Offshore wind is just getting started, really. But then off the west coast of Ireland in deeper water, there's an even better wind resource, and floating offshore wind will be a huge technology for Ireland in the future. So on the next slide then, another piece of our geography that's relevant here is that those yellow lines you can see linking Ireland to Great Britain and also about to link Ireland to France, they're interconnectors. So Ireland is relatively poorly interconnected with the rest of Europe, and they're DC interconnectors because of the distance. So they're not of any use in helping to stabilize our grid when, say, the wind shifts. We've already got just under 40% renewable or wind penetration in Ireland. So when the wind shifts, our grid operators, EirGrid, need to be able to compensate and to keep the system stable. So they've already become probably one of the leading authorities in the world on managing a grid with very high levels of renewable penetration. Our onshore levels of wind penetration are in fact the highest in the world. We're second to Denmark overall, but that's including their offshore resource, which we're just beginning to develop. So that was brought about by another Green minister, the last time the Greens were in power, working with the various companies involved over, say, a 15-year period from a very low base. So just about ESB on the next slide, a little bit about us. We were founded in 1927, 8,000 employees. We're active in both those jurisdictions you saw there, Ireland and the UK. And obviously the UK includes Northern Ireland, and there's an all-island integrated electricity market for the two parts of Ireland across two jurisdictions and two currencies. We also own the 200,000 odd kilometres of electricity network north and south of the border. So our purpose is to lead the low carbon transition. Our CEO, who you can see there, Pat O'Doherty, he sees electricity as a transformative force to bring about a low carbon society. So the vision starts with taking the carbon out of electricity, which Ireland is well on the way to doing. We have a 70% target for 2030, 10 years time for renewables in electricity. And then to further develop our networks. They're already quite smart and they've received international awards, but we want to bring that further to facilitate the connection of more renewables, but also to connect the EV chargers and heat pumps that are going to be required by our customers in their own personal transition. So we're taking low voltage networks that weren't designed for the purpose and finding very clever ways through digitization of making those accommodate these new loads. And the final part of the picture is to help our customers through our supply business on their own personal transformation journey. So if you could just back up, Katrina, just one for a second. In the right-hand side of the slide, you see the carbon intensity target that ESB has. So we have a company carbon target, and we're already after a big reduction, but we plan to reduce that by 50% by 2030 on our way down to net zero well below 2050. So in terms of policy, on the next slide, I won't be going through all of this, but our policies reflect those in Europe. So what you can see on the top of that timeline, those squares, those rectangles, sorry, are various EU policies that have developed down through the years, culminating in the European Green Deal, and just last week, an increased carbon reduction target to 55%, up from 40 by 2030. All the regulations have been drawn up for 40 and they're now being increased. Below the line, you can see Ireland's response to this, which I think Frank mentioned, our climate action plan, which is a very ambitious plan. It's driving for a very significant shift to low carbon heating quite early in our cycle, because we have quite a lot of agriculture. So we need to take the carbon out of heating more rapidly than other countries. And then finally, the programme for government. Frank mentioned that the Greens are back in a coalition government. So the programme for government released in June ups that ambition, doubles it to a 7% year-on-year decrease in carbon emissions. So that includes 70% renewables and electricity, about a quarter of buildings to be converted to low carbon, and no internal combustion vehicles after 2030. So finally, on the last slide, the areas and technology, focus areas and technologies that we're interested in Ireland and in ESB fall from all of the preceding that I've just described. So hydrogen for storage, we don't have much hydro in Ireland. It's a very flat country. So when the weather isn't amenable for wind and solar, we need long-term storage. Carbon capture, if we must, it's not very economical for us, but it may be something we need to use. And then enhanced geothermal energy, which is a technology that's being researched in a number of places, where even countries without volcanic kind of resources, by having very deep bores, can generate electricity using geothermal. So that could be a future answer for Ireland. The last one you see there in the top line is network sensing, which is all about what I mentioned about making our low voltage networks smarter. And then at the bottom line there, very significantly in Ireland, we don't have very much industrial heat. So our heating is mainly space heating, which is lower grade. So heat pumps are really a huge part of the future, both individual heat pump retrofits for buildings, and then heat networks connected to commercial scale heat pumps to speed up the process in certain areas. And finally, then we think electrochemistry in the long term may provide an answer or part of an answer for industry. There are processes in labs already for electrochemical production of steel and also the precursor to Portland cement. So hydrogen may be an interim and it may well then be replaced in those areas, we think. So listen, I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thanks, Cormac. Next up, I'm going to pass it over to Elizabeth Loger from Tenertis. And just a quick note that Foresight and Tenertis are both part of the International Cleantech Network. I'm not sure if you were going to touch on that, but maybe we can dive into that on our collaboration discussion. So Elizabeth, over to you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Good, perfect. So thanks Janet for this invitation, and to Foresight team to have organized this very interesting set of meetings and webinar, and this kind of collaboration between Canada, Ireland, France is exactly the way we should work in the future. Definitely, so Tenertis is a French energy transition cluster. So we have 230 members. One of them being Energy Pool, that is one of our, let's say, witness today. And definitely we have been engaging since 2005, a long story about how to drive energy transition. So next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Definitely what we have and what we are facing in the coming days is that historically in France, we have been extremely centralized and with a very strong, let's say, network and grid management. And now we are facing really the fact that with energy transition, we are not talking anymore about how do you supply on one hand and how do you, let's say, use energy on the other hand, but you have a very strong ecosystem and very strong integration and dynamic integration of all these challenges all together. And definitely when we are talking about that, of course, under energy production, we have how do we integrate renewable energies, and how do we manage and challenge and optimize the mix we need to have depending on the potential of the regions we are working on. As an example, in the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region, we are representing with Tenertis. We are the first decarbonized region in France of two reasons, because of course we have a bit of nuclear, let's say, power plants, but even more, we are extremely strong in hydraulics, let's say, renewable energies, meaning that today our energy is highly decarbonized already in the region. But at the same time, we have very strong industries that are also that need to be decarbonized as well, and that's part of the challenge. And so we have this on one hand, this energy production mix to manage, and renewable energy specifically. On the other hand, we have new usage like mobility with a lot of new challenges to cope with vehicle to grid, for example. And we have all these energy efficiency challenges we need to have on buildings and industries, both to reduce, of course, the consumptions, but also to manage the fact that those buildings or those industries are extremely interconnected with their networks, and also driving their own autonomy and their own, let's say, capacity to produce energy at the end. And to manage all this, and especially because dynamic is partner of the game, we need to have a very solid smart energy system and a grid management network, where we know that the challenges are on resilience of the network, the challenges are on cybersecurity. We need to also have capacity to store and to convert energy, and we speak about, let's say, also not only using electrical energy, but also gas and also other channels. Typically hydraulics is one of the way to store. And we have also multi-energy microgrid that also are there to manage the fact that in some areas and in some sectors, we can have a very strong disconnection from the network to manage the energy. And today, France is really on that challenge and on that path. And if you can go to the next slide, please. As I was saying, power management is really at stake, but also has a very good, let's say, cross over the roads here today. We have been historically quite centrally driven country with a very high quality energy grid management. And typically, let's say, power quality was not really an issue. and we had this very strong high quality network. We have nationwide international companies working on that field. We have a strong research leadership and related business network that really, let's say, makes this very, very solid. So, and like companies like EDF, RTE, Enedis, we have the Supergrid Institute that is specialized in high voltage network, energy conversion, and direct current system. We have top leading academies. I'm just mentioning the one we have in Grenoble with Cube, let's say, university, and on energy and grid management with, let's say, world-class, let's say, academic people. And we also, let's say, private company like Schneider Electric and many SMEs that are also, let's say, working with microgrids and microgrids and power management at the local level. So all this setup is very, very solid. And it's still very also solid and a big asset to face the challenge that we have today with the rising renewable energy spreading. That means that historically it was a little bit impacting the network, but not so much. And now it's really start to wake up and to grow. And Philippe Sutter was mentioning the level of expectation on the renewable insertion on the mix. We start to have an open market, so more and more players on that field. We start to have new services, and I'm sure that Energy Pool will speak about that after. And moreover, we have citizen energy awareness, meaning that people start to be concerned about how they want to use their energy and how they want to buy their energy, and the relationship with energy start to move. And then we are facing some trends like eco-urban areas with self-consumption, where again, massive extension of renewable, either on big lands or also at the very local level, the building level, vehicle to grid, vehicle in grid. We have also multi-energy approaches that are now available, like power to gas or leveraging the H2 and hydrogen capabilities that I think that you had a webinar on that just yesterday. All this is challenging grid resilience and economical model, but it's also a very, very strong opportunity for France. And as, again, Philippe Sutter was saying, the plan that has been announced on the 3rd of September, so very, very recently, is also there to put as a, let's say, strategic sector, the energy and the decarbonized energy and renewable energy on the top of that. We, of course, still have some share of nuclear as part of it, but for sure it will decrease and decrease and decrease until 2050. While the renewable energies will replace fossil energies, and definitely what the France, let's say, government, and of course we are all supportive to that. We want to develop a very solid industry footprint on those markets to be a leader and to have in our let's say companies and industry, let's say top players in that field for the year to come. One thing that is also very, very strong in mind, and we need to keep at, especially on power management, it's cybersecurity start to be a very strong challenge. Up to now, it was not that critical, but more and more, as it start to be strategic, it start to be critical. And we have a strong, let's say, activity on that with some clusters that are more on the digital world, really to drive this. And so we have been building on a French level an alliance called the Smart Energy Alliance that is really here to share collaboration within the French, let's say, organizations, working with the French government and bodies, and also, of course, engaging together to a European project. Again, some topics, and I will stop on that, but we're active on local energy system, energy management, energy storage, big data processing, self-consumption activities, energy planning, digital customer services. How do we place with energy saving? How do we optimize our capacity to drive smart buildings and citizen engagement? I would say this year was a little bit strange with COVID. So we drove a number of webinars on that topics. And but we used to work and to participate to European Utility Week, and we expect to be in Milano in 2021. But okay, if it happened, we were in Paris last year. So I think for me it's over, but I'm ready to answer to your question further in the show.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Much appreciated. Lots of good information there. Next up, I'm going to pass it over to Foresight's VP of Partnerships and Strategy, Catriona also led our core cluster project. So Catriona, over to you.
Thank you, Jeanette. And good morning and good afternoon, everybody on the call today. Really pleased to be here. I'm going to provide a short snapshot of what's happening in clean energy management in British Columbia. As part of the core Cleantech cluster work, we are committed to supporting cleantech companies in this space, but also bridging the gaps between corporations, industry, academia, investors, and government as well. So the key strategies in British Columbia that help to support clean energy development. So first of all, we have the Clean BC Plan, and this is the pinnacle document for the province that really outlines our GHG reduction targets of 40%, 60%, and 80% by 2030, 2040, 2050. This document was released in 2018 and is available publicly. And what you see there is how they're looking to not only support clean energy through hydroelectricity development, but also try to reduce energy use in the home from fossil-based source. And so with the two main utilities in the province, we have BC Hydro and Fortis BC, and they have committed to supporting electricity development and also expanding electrification to be able to support GHG reductions. And also with our gas utility, Fortis BC, who recently outlined their clean growth pathway, they are also aligning their efforts to reduce GHGs as well, while maintaining customer affordability for, say, natural gas and things like that. And so there's a lot of options being explored around clean energy development, but also around renewable gases, in the province as well. So as part of that Clean BC plan, we see there's a desire to increase clean energy in key sectors of the economy, particularly those that emit high carbon. So for example, in transportation, which is about 39% of carbon emissions in the province, we see there's a lot more policies and strategies coming into play that enable this reduction. So for example, we have a low carbon fuel standard here. We also have a zero emission vehicle mandate. So to reach 100% zero emission vehicles on the ground by 2040. Already, British Columbia is one of the North American leaders in terms of zero emission vehicle deployment, and that is only growing because we do have a number of rebates available for consumers and everyday folks who want to be able to, purchase a vehicle. They're able to get a rebate for that too. So we're really working on the vehicle side of things. In built environment, there's a number of activities, and here I've only provided a short selection of those, but there's ongoing work in terms of the building electrification roadmap, looking at how do we support building GHG reduction, either from construction at the very beginning all the way to step codes for new buildings, and how do we ensure that energy efficiency is baked into those building codes as they look to be developed. But also heat pump incentives, further to Cormac's point, how do we heat the home in a way that is non-GHG related? And so there's a lot of incentives for consumers to be able to adopt heat pumps here. Although we are importing them a lot, we're looking to see how we can develop them here as well. And then there is funds available like the Building Innovation Fund and a lot of other sort of challenges and government support available around transportation and built environment as well to support projects and kind of get them up and running, whether it's around project financing for rollout of technology or other things. In terms of the decarbonisation of the energy sector, we're seeing a lot more work happening around renewable gases. And this was pertaining more to yesterday's conversation around hydrogen and renewable gases, but Fortis BC, our major gas utility here, is really exploring that as part of their strategy. And there's also a number of energy efficiency programs coming out from both BC Hydro and Fortis BC as well for consumers, for businesses, to really help them, reduce their emissions and also support a cleaner energy transition as well. So the advantages that we have in British Columbia, when we at Foresight and the core Cleantech cluster, when we look at our ecosystem here, about a quarter of the companies that we have in BC, and Cleantech startups specifically, identify their primary market as clean energy and management. This is great because that's about probably about 80 companies here in British Columbia, and most of them are exporting their abroad. So for example, today we're going to hear from Clear and also from Portable Electric in the second panel, who will discuss, you know, some of their market needs and collaborative needs. We also have strong research and development across universities in the province as well. So not only in Vancouver with UBC and SFU and BCIT, but also in Okanagan with UBCO. We are working a lot with Washington State and other types of partners on clean grid initiatives to really enable those partnerships as well to thrive. We do have that supporting policy environment as I described earlier. And also we do have an entity like the Core Cluster and Foresight who are dedicated to making these connections, building the network, and really driving forward clean energy and management of that as well to help reach our decarbonisation goals. So if you're interested in learning more, please do read our strategy on corecleantech.com or reach out to me or my colleagues. Thank you, Jeanette.
Thanks, Catriona. So it is 9:08, and we are going to take a moment to do a few Q&As before passing it on to the next panel. I'm actually going to start with you, Cormac. I noticed in your overview that you started to talk, you didn't really get into too much around transportation. And I know, as Catriona mentioned, here in BC, we have sort of built environment and transportation as two of the largest areas to tackle. Are there some specific ways that people can get involved in understanding Ireland's approach to power management as it relates to transportation and built environment?
Thanks very much, Jeanette. I skipped transport a little bit because just of time, trying to keep the time down, but the main thrusts in transport in Ireland are, like I mentioned, the ban on internal combustion engine vehicles, also active transport, so cycling infrastructure, kind of more walkable areas, etc. And then the electrification of the bus fleet in the cities and also the mainline trains as well. So there are programs kicking off in those. But let's be honest, transport is a huge challenge. The 1990 baseline was set before Ireland's car market really took off because we were relatively less well off back then. So trying to get back down to where we need to be is actually going to be a very big challenge. And now people are, like everywhere else in the world, buying bigger cars as well. So we need to change that into other modes. So it's, yeah.
Is there a preference on hydrogen versus electric? Or?
Well, you're talking to a person in an electricity company, so I think people take a jaundiced view of what I say. But I've been watching it closely, and I think the answer to that probably is where you can manage electric. It's known technology at this stage, and just given the time we've got to make changes to our climate, had we started this 20 or 30 years ago, it might be a different answer. But we have to use the technologies that are there now. So I think hydrogen will be looked at in heavy transport, where there are other options, but it's more of a contest. But there are experts even thinking in those areas that battery will predominate. So we see hydrogen as being huge in industry and in storage, but a bit unproven in transport. Japan has been working on hydrogen and fuel cells for a very, very long time, and we've yet to see a real breakthrough in that area.
Good feedback. Thank you. Elizabeth, what's your perspective on transportation?
Definitely, if I'm looking on what is in the trend in France, I would say there is definitely, a trend to have a mix ultimately between what will be driven by electricity, so typically individual cars. The trend is very, very strong today in France, and we see now massive, purchasing or renting, but whatever, usage of individual cars with electricity, supported by the government for sure. And at the same time, we have strong plans for hydrogen as well, both for heavy transportation. And when we are dealing about heavy transportation, I'm speaking about train, I'm speaking about ultimately planes, and we're speaking about buses, heavy vehicles for, let's say, a building, for example, so the kind of thing you find on the field. Everything that is heavy would be on hydrogen, will be pushed on hydrogen, and in some region we'll also have some biogas still active, because the capacity of the region, of the area, will be really more on biogas than hydrogen that we need to transport and so on. But definitely electricity for, let's say, individual cars and the smaller, let's say, usage, and moreover, hydrogen for, let's say, either professional usage and heavy transportation. And we have a number of actions, especially in the region, where the region will engage to build a train, typically to cover, let's say, former diesel, let's say, lines, and to transform those lines into hydrogen lines for train.
Great, thank you. Catriona, do you have any commentary?
I think from what we see in BC as well, electric vehicles are the most popular, and fuel cell vehicles for cars is still very expensive, and they aren't being developed, I guess, or made at such a high rate. In terms of wider transportation initiatives, like in the trucking sector and medium to heavy duty, we see more electric and being more cost effective at this time, although there are some technologies that can bridge the cost gap, such as with Hydro Energy from BC, who are able to convert trucks with hydrogen very cheaply. But it's still a long way in terms of costs and price and economics to make it viable for the heavy transportation industry, which has the most emissions.
Thank you. I'm going to sort of shift gears, and again, we have just a couple of minutes here, so we'll have to be brief, but a couple of questions coming up around the role that digital and AI might play in power management and our work here in our transitioning. Elizabeth, maybe I'll start with you, and then Catriona, and then end with you, Cormac. Commentary around digital and AI to support this work.
Yeah, I think that's I would tend to say AI is really a big challenge, and how we can use it, because behind in artificial intelligence, we have also the challenge on how do we manage the data, and what can we do with the data, and what cannot we do with the data. And so definitely in terms of application, everything we have this kind of consolidation of information at the very low level that we can aggregate and use and combine, and then try to predict a number of things. And typically on network management and grid management, that would be very, very useful. And everything that will help the predictability of the model will certainly use let's say, artificial intelligence challenges and capabilities. This is for sure. Then what we are facing today is much more on the legacy or legal standpoint, is the privacy of the information, and how people can also get benefit from that data for its own challenges, but also for the global sake. And I think there are a lot of information, let's say, a lot of challenges today on that topic in France, but definitely on how do you combine all this individual information to make it global at the let's say, either intermediate or even higher level will be challenged. And we're working with a number of universities on that as well.
Thank you. Catriona?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's been a real trend around digitization of energy for the past few years. And that's because, as Elizabeth rightly pointed out, the data potential for making those efficiencies and predictability around certain assets and their generation and also their management is really key. There's a lot of companies here in British Columbia that work on that. Aside from our speakers today, we also have companies like Mbala. I know they're on the call today. They're present in the US and Europe as well. We also have Allsense, who are working with utilities. And I guess, in terms of utilities and transmission network operators and others, they are really trying to build out their business model and maintain their business model over the coming years. And that's the major trend we're seeing here. And data management is one way to be able to fix that problem and overcome the challenge.
Thank you. And the last comment from you, Cormac.
Again, a very good question. We're currently using AI with our wind turbine blade inspections. There's remote inspection through drones and use of AI in deciding when to replace them. Also, there's a lot of scope, I feel, in network management, both distribution networks with these various loads I was describing and all the extra information that's going to come in, like Elizabeth said, and reacting to things more quickly, perhaps, than people can react. And likewise in transmission as well, because as I was describing earlier, things get a lot more dynamic when you're dealing with weather-dependent renewables. So there'll be a huge amount more information collected, and I think AI will be very useful there in deciding how to react. Already, we're using big data to learn about the impact of increased storms from climate change on our networks and learning things about them we didn't know before. So I think AI has a role in speeding up that whole process as well.
That's great. That's great. Thank you to you three for joining. There's actually some really interesting questions around small modular nuclear and things like that. Unfortunately, we won't get to it, but perhaps we need a follow-on session to dive into more of the details. So I'm sorry for folks that I can't get to your questions. Moving on to panel 2, we are going to hear from innovators, SMEs, on sort of their perspective on what we need to do as a collective to support the sector in the next 2, 5, 10 years, what collaborative efforts we could embark on, and then of course, you know, in particular, Canada and Europe. So we're going to kick off with Gareth from Clear Renewables. Gareth, over to you.
Yeah. Hey folks, it's brilliant to be here. Thank you very much for the invite. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Clear Renewables, based in Vancouver, BC. So we have a mission here at Clear to minimize humankind's impact on the climate. The way we're doing that is by turning renewable energy data into action. So we have a software AI platform for wind and solar farms around the world. We've got about 67 staff, with about half our revenue coming from Europe, where we have about 10 or 12 staff. And we're working right now with about 10% of the world's wind farm owners on a megawatt basis, and we have about 10 gigawatts of wind and solar on the platform.
Thanks, Gareth. I know you're great. You're going to save time for Q&A unless you have something else to add.
No, yeah. So from a perspective of collaboration, we're really keen to kind of speak with partners in the space. But yeah, I'm keen to have the Q&A.
Awesome, perfect. Next up, I'm going to pass it over to Connor O'Brien from ESB Innovation Pipeline Project Manager from ESB Group. Connor.
Thanks, Jeanette. Thank you for the invite. So listen, I'm just going to talk about really where the rubber hits the road in terms of ESB. The Innovation Pipeline team basically develops solutions for the challenges and opportunities that ESB faces. So our team, our background is in a number of different areas: corporate finance. We've founded some technology startups ourselves, VC, IT project delivery, engineering, and new business model delivery. So there's a kind of a range of skill sets that we have within that team. So what we do basically is develop a pipeline of new opportunities under 3 headings: cost reduction, performance improvement for within our existing business units, and then new energy service opportunities for our customers. So what we decided to do a number of years ago was we kind of reviewed the market, and we said, you know, in terms of utility players and utility partners and OEMs, you know, we're pretty well set there. Where we have a bit of a gap is with startups. And so we kind of looked at that and said, well, how are we going to attract startups to ESB? Because ultimately we're not a creator of technology, we're a user of technology. So we said, we need to partner with these companies. How do we get to them? And so what we decided to do was actually create a global accelerator with 10 other utilities, 9 other utilities, I should say, 10 in total, called Free Electrons. That's about 4 years ago. So we're in our 4th year. And the big prize really there is 82 million customers. So Cormac kind of gave an indication. We have about 3.2 million customers in Ireland. Across the business with the other utilities, our partners. That's 82 million. So some of those partners are American Electric Power in the US, ourselves, EDP in Portugal, E.ON, Dubai Electric and Water, Singapore Power, China Light and Power in Hong Kong, TEPCO in Japan, and Origin and AusNet in Australia. So pretty good selection. And that the big prize for startups is that they get access to those. Not only do they get access to those utility players, they get access to their 82 million customers. So what we've kind of noticed is that the rate of change of technology is growing, and Free Electrons offers us that snapshot of what energy tech companies are doing, what they're working on, and that changes year to year. So typically we get, last year we got about 900 energy companies, startups, entering that program and looking to work with us. Obviously we bring that down. I'll talk about that in a minute. And I suppose the key message here is this is not innovation theater. This is about actually doing real world pilots which deliver results quickly. And so that fits with our sort of brighter future strategy we have at ESB, where we talk about decarbonization, customer centricity, and development of new services. So it offers, our strategy is to offer low cost, clean energy to our customer, and obviously the focus that Cormac mentioned about electrification of heat and transport. The program itself, the Free Electrons program, is a short sort of gated process, 4 modules every 6 to 8 weeks. So, it's done in kind of 6 to 9 months. And then basically the question for us is we work with our business units. So we kind of say early in the year, what do you think your problems are for this year? And we try and find a solution as part of that process. So last year, 2020, for the Electrons program, we got close to 900 startups. That ultimately is boiled down to 15. And those 15 we basically do pilots with. Now, not all utilities have to do pilots with the 15 companies. And the beauty of this program, because we're non-competing, we share our learnings. So if we have a situation where one company trials a technology or a service from a startup company, we get to hear that directly, or we get to even partner with that other utility and find out, how well has that worked. So that's been really, really interesting. Obviously, it's been a sort of a challenging year from the COVID perspective, but it was an opportunity as well for us. We decided to go digital, and we went digital with the program, but we also went digital much faster in the rest of our business, faster than we had obviously originally anticipated. With customers working from home, rapidly changing needs, basically we was trying to facilitate our customers. So, we did create a partnership with Vodafone a number of years ago, which brings gigabit broadband to our customers. We use our overhead lines and our fiber network that we have here in Ireland to partner with them and offer that to our customers. We're now moving into adjacent sectors, modular data centers, offering kind of low latency to our customers as well, and then offering some of our SME customers access to energy services via digital platform. So it's actually been an opportunity for us this year. So that's sort of, it gives a general overview, a general sense of what our innovation pipeline team does. I mean, it's around supporting the ESB strategy. The beauty of obviously having something like Free Electrons and developing that accelerator with our partners, it's a competitive process, but it gives us that global reach. And, it gives us a very good screening system to see what's out there and to ultimately find those best startup companies in our sector in the world.
Great. Thank you, Connor. I have a couple of questions on that, but we'll wait until the next part of the session. I'm going to pass it over to Emmanuel Chantegrel.
Yes, hi.
C'est vrai? Okay, so, great. Over to you.
Thank you.
Over to you, Emmanuel. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, and hello to everybody. I'll tell you a bit about Energy Pool, and for sure we will talk about innovation and the way we proceed, especially to cover the needs of different type of clients all across the world. Just a few words about Energy Pool. We are a French company, a French group of several firms all across the world. We have subsidiaries in Japan, in Turkey, in France for sure. We are expanding in different countries and covering some areas like Scandic, Northern Europe, but also playing in Middle East area and also North Africa. Energy Pool is a global optimization of energy flexibilities and also complex system optimizer. What I mean to say is that we help utilities to match generation and demand, so to create the adequacy between those in the present situation, but also future. This involving different parts of the energy transition concern and also innovation approach, meaning that we are in the middle of a storage expanding process, microgrid, decentralization of production, grid congestion, renewable integration and mix in the grid, and also industrial consumption optimization, because mostly when we are able to optimize or to create flexibility for grid benefits, this is because we are able to manage or to handle or to supervise heavy industry consumer consumption. And this is thanks to our 10 years of experience with a very strong DNA in industrial, heavy industry process, like cement plant, aluminium, steel industry, chemical, and so on. And thanks to that knowledge, but also the experience that we have built up into software and operation activity performed on behalf for utilities. Conor O'Brien was talking about TEPCO. We are also working with TEPCO in Japan to help them to handle their portfolio of consumers and also to optimize their portfolio of consumers based on their production or their generation capacities. So we consider at Energy Pool that we are at the middle of the energy transition. We are at the middle of the decarbonation objectives and also playing a big role in between the utility needs and the industrial or prosumer benefits or constraints.
Great. Thank you very much. And last but not least, we have Sarath. And Sarath, I'll let you say your last name. He's the CEO of Portable Electric, a Vancouver-based technology company. Sarath, over to you.
Great, thank you. So my name is Sarath Samarsekera, and I'm the CEO of Portable Electric. At Portable Electric, we're focused on the transition to the low carbon economy by creating technologies that are easily adopted and economically viable. And that's a really important piece that I will touch on over the course of the next few minutes. So we design and build the VoltStack series of portable peak power stations, and they replace your gas and diesel generator. The gas generator is one of the worst polluters and most widely undercounted technologies that we use today. Most countries' GHG calculations just don't take into account this the gas and diesel generator. So today, Portable Electric can replace anywhere from your 2 kilowatt to 200 kilowatt generator. We feel one of the most critical aspects of transitioning the power and energy market is to recognize that energy is not a goal in itself. Rather, energy enables a host of other activities. And so in order to be successful here, we need to minimize the disruption of those dependent activities when we transition energy. Our approach to innovation is to methodically resolve problems. We systematically increase the number of end user activities that can be powered with clean energy. And so we believe that innovation occurs under stress, and change needs to be needed, not just wanted. And so the innovation that we bring to the table, we believe is a function of the environment, the education, resources, and time that Canada is able to offer, as well as the demands that the technology is being put to. And so part of what I want to talk about today is some of the challenges that Canada has. We have vast distances, extreme weather. It can be anywhere from -50 to +40 here. And we marry that with the people who are both demanding and rough on equipment. And that's just our baseline. That's where we start when we think about technology and how to make it industrial and how to make it resolve your problems. And so that is our minimum viable product requirements. And we also come from a culture that both celebrates and encourages independence, but then is also highly dependent and cooperative. So at Portable Electric, we have a really hands-on approach to problem solving. We don't just sell a product, we use it. And for us, how better do we understand a customer's problems than to walk in the shoes of our customers? And we've gotten quite good at that, providing both relevant and cost-efficient solutions to our customers' problems. And today, our equipment, we replace generators in over 9 countries. And so what PE is looking for today, and what we wanted to talk about a little bit, was how do we help Europe retire all of its fossil generators? And we think that we can be really helpful here. And we just need a few things from you guys. One is obviously access to the market. And we can talk about all the different ways we want to have access to the market. We also want to make sure that that access is meaningful. So beyond just saying that we can sell into the market, we would like to talk about how we can get increased access. 2, we have to create that need that we're talking about, not just a want. Everybody wants to be greener. Everybody wants to talk about how we can improve the environment, but we have to actually create a need. And the regulatory environment can create that need. In Canada, for instance, we're banning generators in our national parks. And when you create the need, that will accelerate innovation in that industry. And we also want to create an environment that incentivizes customers to embrace the new technologies. One of the ways we can do that is to level the playing field on cost definitions. Generators are immensely polluting, hugely expensive, and ultimately they're subsidized by both governments and existing industry. How do we get rid of those subsidies? Let's not penalize the new technologies, but how do we minimize those subsidies? And lastly, I'd say, how do we encourage real partnerships? I think every national government has a problem in that they're there to serve their people and they're there to serve their companies. So how do we create real partnerships without taking away local jobs, without taking away money from local innovation? And so how do we create a partnership that encourages Canadian companies to come and invest locally? So I think that PE, we bring a unique perspective in that being Canadian, we have a perspective that is built from our environment, our climate, our culture, and that can be additive to what's needed in European problems. And so for us, I'll leave just one last thought here, is that when we approach a problem, we really come at it from our knowledge base, and increasing the knowledge base and increasing the perspectives will help European countries also broaden the number of solutions that they bring to market. And I think that's where, when we start talking about real collaboration, it's more than just, hey, can we sell to your customers? It's how do you take what we know and apply it to problems? And the best way to do that is to work with Canadian companies so that we feel and see your problems firsthand. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Saras. We're going to jump back to some of the questions here, and I'll sort of break it down a little bit because we have such a dynamic panel. But Gareth, back to you a little bit. You have been successful in entering the European market. Maybe you can just highlight some of the, I guess, fundamentals that have made that work for you. What's worked and what could we do better?
Yeah, I mean, I probably, with the short time we have here, I'll focus on maybe what we can do better. Like right now, Clear has staff in the UK, we've got staff in Spain, in Scandinavia as well. I'm working with clients across Europe on their renewables assets. And there's kind of 3 main things that when we talk about collaboration and innovation and climate, which is, is this week, I want to come back to that, is one, I'll just emphasize how much of a pain in the ass it is, part of my language, in terms of setting up an entity and getting staff on the ground in country. Like right now, we're going into countries with employment rates of, unemployment of 20%, and we're trying to generate jobs in country, and it's a bureaucratic pain at times. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if we were setting up a company here in BC and I was able to transfer that information to France, to Ireland, to wherever it is, in a really seamless, straightforward way? Like 80% of the employees in Canada are in small to medium-sized businesses. And it's much harder for them to get the resources to innovate. So we're taking 80% of the workforce in Canada and putting hurdles and barriers for them to innovate on global and climate solutions there, because entry to a market is more difficult than and would be ideal. So having a global business operations passport, whether it's company registration, it's taxation, I think is something that speaking to the government agencies here and elsewhere, I would encourage you folks to really focus on that. It's not as sexy as building a hydrogen plant or building some specific solution, but it will have a much bigger impact on climate change. The second point, I'd say I'd come back to those specific solutions again. One is that global passport. The second point I would say is, let's stop focusing on the how and focus on where we want to get to. And we saw the Green Energy Act come out in France. We've seen other governments announce stimulus, but the government's picking winners time and time again. They're saying, I want to go nuclear, or I want to build hydrogen, or whatever it is. Governments should be moving taxation away from awesome things like prosperity and wealth that we should be promoting for the wider population, to pollution. Coming back to Sarat's comment before, putting the incentives in place, which is primarily a carbon tax, whether it's a production tax, a consumption tax. I'm really excited for the throne speech on Wednesday, but I'm also terrified that we're going to go picking solutions rather than focusing on getting a carbon tax in place. And the last thing I would say for governments as well, if you are subsidizing, if you are picking winners on outcomes, is make sure that you get access to the data. I've been in the renewables industry since 2005, and we've learned a lot in that time, scaling from a very small industry to this massive global industry. And we're looking to do that everywhere in these climate solutions now, is if you are putting subsidies in there, make sure that you get access to the information, to the wider market, so we can iterate and improve, because there is just a learning process on whether it's portable electric battery solutions, whether it's a new wind turbine technology, whatever it is. If we can get the data flowing back so we can learn faster. That's the other thing. So in summary, just hit on my 3 points of what we can do to drive innovation in the market. It's that global passport for companies working with, in the environment. It's focusing on carbon tax and not specific solutions, whichever government you are. And thirdly, making sure that the data can be shared quickly so we can learn and scale these solutions really quickly. Sorry to rant. It's all good.
Thanks, Gareth. That's great. Emmanuel, do you have some commentary around Gareth's feedback there?
Well, what I think while listening to Gareth was that maybe where he's fully right is that there should be more easiness in creating, let's say, creating bridges for medium-sized companies between Europe and Canada, or between France and Canada, at least to start with. Especially for SMEs or mid-sized companies, because what we can notice, and this is not only in the energy sector or energy transition, that the mid-sized companies have much more difficulties for sure to explore new markets or to go in new areas or in new continents. So maybe there could be a way for that, and should be maybe an opportunity to mix incubators activities, or to create some bridges, I don't know, through webinars or presentations or cross presentations among the different type of companies from France, Europe, and Canada.
Great. Connor, if you have a comment on this as well, I do have another question for you regarding, how you select the 15 finalists for some of your innovation funding at ESB, and of course, what kind of budgets do you try to leverage those dollars with government funds, or is it all an ESB investment? Any commentary you have there, and how folks can access it?
So from our perspective, the way I'll just address the original question first, very briefly, and put it this way: we're sort of we're a channel. We see ourselves as a channel to market for new technology companies. So we're kind of driven really to provide the best solutions to our customers, and that obviously for a utility company never buys a new technology without trialing it first. It's just one of those things in this sector. So we have sort of slicked down our procurement process around, particularly for electrons, accelerator program to allow those companies to access the market quickly, do a trial, get the results, and then decide, yes, you know what, this is something we want to roll out. So from that perspective, and we've had a lot of success working with non-Irish entities. So when it comes to taxation, that kind of stuff, that's the stuff that we work with those companies to make sure that is streamlined. In terms of how we select our 15 companies, so that's a decision. So each of the 10 utility will review the close to 900 applications, and then we will then basically boil that down to 35 in this case this year, and they go to a boot camp, and we had to do it digitally this year. Normally we do it face to face at one of the locations that belong to each of the utilities, and we basically sit, talk, work with them, do one-to-one meetings, and figure out, is this something that's of interest? And ultimately, at the end of that week, the 10 utilities vote on which companies they think they can do pilots with, and that's the key bit. Not what companies do I really like. It's, well, who can I actually pilot this technology? So that's what it comes into. That's one of the driving sort of focuses of free electrons. In terms of funding, yes, while some of the utilities are focused on investment, and we had one of the companies last year. So over the last number of years, there's been quite a few investments from different companies. ESB at the moment does not invest in those companies, but we do take their technology and roll it out. We had one of the companies last year had quite a substantial Series B financing. Actually, a company that we were involved in we already had an equity stake in that basically became part of the program, and through that program they got to meet all the other utilities, and one of our other partners, EDP, invested in them quite a substantial stake. So it's the business units within and our own units within that basically provide the funding to do the POCs. So we don't actually come along and say, here's a bunch of money. We say, you know what, you guys, we want to do a POC, or a proof of concept with you guys, and we're willing to pay for it. So it's not a free, we're not looking for a freebie. We're looking for you guys to actually show, here's what it looks like as part of a POC. And if we roll it out, this is the sort of money that we're talking about. So that's ultimately how it works.
Thanks, Connor. That's very helpful. Here in BC, Fortis BC just launched a $22 million fund to help scale technologies that support their natural gas infrastructure, as well as some of the other initiatives that they're working on. So I think that's a first step, at least for BC, where innovation is more top of mind than ever as we look to tackle these climate challenges. I've got a couple of questions here in the Q&A box. I'll start with Sarath because it's a startup question. Startups usually struggle to engage successfully with large companies. So how can that problem be solved to put through much needed emerging tech faster? So Sarath, do you want to comment on that?
I was on mute there. Yeah, absolutely. I think especially from my personal experience, there's a huge imbalance when you're negotiating with a large company between both knowledge and expectations throughout the negotiation process and the discussion process. One of the pieces that that would be useful to a small company is for large companies to recognize that the resource imbalance isn't a negotiating tool. Rather, it's an impediment to having a successful negotiation. Something that takes a lot of time, something that takes a lot of paperwork, something that takes a lot of money is a detriment to where we'll actually even not engage because we know that the process is too long and cumbersome. So you know, how do we approach these companies is for us, it's just to pick the ones that we are going to invest in. And that probably leaves a lot of opportunities on the table. But right from the beginning, I think that a company that wants to engage with small companies, setting up a process that is efficient and quick and scaled to the type of partnership you're looking for. If someone's looking for a $10 million project, then they understand that there has to be a significant amount of due diligence. But if it's a $10,000 or $25,000 prize, as soon as it gets to be above 2 pages, you guys have gone too far. It stops being an incentive. And I know that companies are obviously trying to make sure that they cover all their bases. But when the prizes or the rewards are small and they're just the first step in developing a partnership, then the type of application needs to be scaled down significantly. And that's probably our biggest issue with working with large companies is the huge hurdles just to have a conversation.
Emmanuel, do you have some commentary there as well?
No, nothing specific. I mean, I agree that the most difficult when you're a small company or launching a new technology, that you need to start with proof of concept. And maybe when we fall down, most of the time is not the case at Energy Pool, but while having some activities supporting startups in Paris. I know about this trick, unfortunately, is that you spend a lot of time to perform POCs and POCs and POCs and running after money to get the support in order to continue to develop your product. And maybe what could be much more helpful is to tie up with a large potential client. I know that in France we try, but it's not only in France, we try to support mid-sized companies or startups to have some kind of tie-up or joint approach with multinational companies. This is a way that we should push. And most of the time, but it's only maybe my personal feeling, is that the quicker you get out from a proof of concept and running a real product or technology, the better it is for your business plan, for your profit and loss figures, and so on.
Thank you.
I can add to that if you like, Jeanette. I mean, just
Yeah,
quickly,
please.
Sarap, I mean, we have a very different experience from Sarap in terms of Sarap's working in hardware and we're working in software. So it's easier for us. It's cheaper for us to kind of try things quickly. But I would just come back on the point of saying, like, the definition of a startup is a failing business. If they weren't a startup anymore, they'd have a profitable business model and everything else going forward. So I think it should be hard for startups as we go forward, and you just have to make sure you've got that product market fit. And I say early on for us in 2017, the way we dealt with that is by basically just getting our requirements down as low as possible to engage, making sure we got paid, we owned our IP, and we had a contract in place, but making it really easy for the big corporations to walk away if we didn't perform with our products. And I think that there's a range of strategies that the kind of people can employ there.
I think from our perspective, I mean, we made a decision a long time ago that, you know, rather than to kind of phrase kick the tires, you know, for 6 or 12 months and lead startup companies on, we make it really clear up front whether they're interested in doing business with you or we're not. And if we're not, we say thank you very much and we part ways. And I think that's useful because from our perspective, you know, you end up getting a reputation that if you're going to continually kick the tires of these companies but not actually do anything with them or lead them on, then nobody wants to work with you. So we are very clear about how we deal with startup companies. We understand, having been, done startups myself, understanding that, these guys don't have time to be wasting on, continually talking. It's okay, we're either doing something now and get it done, and and as I say, we have to do POCs, we have to do trials, but we get those done quickly in a short amount of time, and then look at the results and then make a decision around that. So that's how we operate.
That's very helpful. That's very helpful. I'm going to list a longer question here from one of our guests, and I'm going to start this, maybe Connor, actually to you first, and then followed by Emmanuel. How do you set up a market system that accommodates generators with a free feedstock, such as wind and solar, so that the price paid for a megawatt doesn't fall to zero and the market remains attractive to renewable power generators? Can the industry move beyond pre-negotiated auction decade-long contracts? Is there room to incentivize these generators to provide other services such as frequency stabilization, storage, etc.? And I know you're both covering a pretty broad spectrum of the power market, so I thought, Connor.
Thanks for that. Yeah, so I suppose from our perspective to answer the first question, do we see a market system where it falls to zero? No, I don't think we do. I think, does it put pressure on the market system to depress prices? Ultimately, yes, possibly is the answer there. Clearly, there's still a capex involved in wind and solar, so therefore there has to be a payback ultimately for companies to want to go ahead and invest in that. Clearly, the auctions that have taken place are on the solar side of things, certainly in the sunnier parts of the world and Ireland. We've seen some pretty crazy prices there. But I mean, we're looking at that technology and we're looking at it moving to be much more efficient, and therefore, there is that directional trend. I think in terms of incentivizing generators to provide other services, yes, most assuredly there is a market there for that, and that's something that we're focused on right now. Is to how do we, when we look at our existing generation fleet and we look at investing in new offshore wind, we kind of also look at, okay, where else is our profit margin coming from? Because clearly, if our profit margin is reducing somewhat from that existing generation fleet and potentially offshore or onshore offshore wind, yes, there is definitely room to incentivize generators, particularly in a situation like Ireland, where you have, Cormac talked about the interconnectivity piece, where you don't have that interconnectivity and grid support. We're always trying to see how much renewables can we get on the system, and therefore providing incentives around frequency stabilization and storage is a key part of our market. And that's something that's happened over the last number of years, that the market has shifted away from being one of availability to one of providing services. And a lot of our focus now is not just on developing our renewable fleet, but is also providing those grid services such that we can increase our availability of or we can increase our renewable market. So right now, Cormac talked about 40% wind. We've got up to 75% instantaneous on our system at one point there recently, but we definitely need to look at frequency stabilization and storage as a key element of providing, getting that up to the kind of 75-80% renewable target.
Great, thank you. Emmanuel?
I totally follow what Connor said. The key words onto that are, from my point of view and from energy pool point of view, is that we talk about more volatility when we have to insert renewable onto the grid. So this creates issues. That means that we need much more flexibility. But in the meantime, because of decentralization and because of more and more assets coming on the grid, we have also more possibility for flexibility. And then the problem is that we need to maintain some high-level pricing for those flexibility requirements. This is one of the, the first 2 points from my point of view. Conor mentioned also about the interconnectivity, and in Europe is a great example of that, because most of the European countries are interconnected. So there is a good way to manage this flexibility, or at least to manage the volatility of renewable. In the meantime, what would serve the purpose, because if we talk about renewable, we talk also about intermittency, and sometimes, not most of the times, but sometimes when you need some generation, it will not be given by the renewable, but mostly by conventional. And then storage approach can also serve the purpose, and this is why maybe we see more and more renewable production plants assisted by storage plants or storage infrastructure, because if you want to deliver services to the grid and to engage yourself to deliver those services as per a capacity requirement or a frequency regulation, you need to play also with this storage capacity. But the positive aspect is that as we are talking about innovation and technology, this gives a very good playground for many companies coming from Canada or from Europe to develop services, to develop new technology, and to perform optimized service for that aim.
The market can be the solution. Let's be very clear on that as well. Like, I mean, we're talking about PPAs here. Texas, other markets have done a great job of spreading renewables and peaker plants and everything else without governments picking winners and driving up costs. So when people talk about PPAs, I just want to say, like, renewables is so much cheaper if we don't get governments involved in setting that pricing. Sorry to hop on.
No worries, no worries. We're down to 9:59, so 1 minute left. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and we're going to close off with a few quick slides. Thank you to all of the panelists and contributors. It's been a really exciting conversation, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we can talk about. So please stay informed on follow-up sessions that we hope to host in the coming months. I just want to close off that Foresight does have an industry innovation program. We run an SDG Challenge Connect series as well with folks like PepsiCo and SciPem. And so if you are interested in, as Sarath mentioned, sort of more quicker ways to sort of understand what innovation is available to solve some of your innovation gaps, we're happy to facilitate conversations there. And then of course tomorrow, Thursday, we'll have our session on circular economy. Catriona will be leading that conversation, followed by a more delegate or organized Canada and Europe Green Recovery Dialogue between different government officials. So you can listen in and contribute to that discussion as well. So with that said, thank you everyone. Have a great rest of your day, or if you're in evening time, have a great sleep and rest, and a great day tomorrow. Thanks everyone. Chat soon. Bye.
Bye.